Delegation led by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana and International Relations counterpart Ronald Lamola represents South Africa at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. This is the annual event which brings together governments, business leaders and others together. The South African delegation is likely to stress the latest improvements in the country's economic condition after the upgrade of its credit rating and its removal from the grey list by the Financial Action Task Force. We're back in Switzerland, where Arabile Gumede is. And Arabile, good morning. You're going to have an interesting conversation, I think, on the brand of South Africa, a brand that's taken a beating from Washington over the last couple of months.
Yeah, look, certainly over the last year, we've been looking at it, Iman, and wondering to ourselves, what exactly is the message South Africa can deliver to the rest of the world to look as positive as possible? Who better to speak to than Brand SA CEO Neville Matjie, who joins us now. Neville, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. How does South Africa reposition or rebrand, if you want to call it that, considering the last 12 months? It's been a crazy one.
I think the rebranding has already been done. You know, the hosting of the G20 was a successful event. We were able to really demonstrate to the world that we are a force to be reckoned with. South Africa is a powerhouse, not only within the African continent, but within the global south. So that messaging has really been driven. What we are here for is really to continue the messaging around that, to showcase, number one, our core strengths. In fact, what the world is saying about us. Of course, we've been removed from the grey list. From a risk appetite perspective in the EU, we've been, of course, upgraded. Of course, the Standard & Poor's has also upgraded South Africa's credit ratings. That's what the world is saying about us. What are we saying? We're here to position South Africa as a destination of choice for investors. We're here to speak to the world leaders who are here to ensure that we remain above board in terms of our messaging, and most critically, the diversification strategy that the President has given us. We're here to continue with that. We've realized with the geopolitics that you can't leave your eggs all in one basket, and we continue that dialogue. Hence, of course, the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition is here, Minister of Energy, and all the other ministers, Minister Lamola. They're all here really to drive that messaging that cooperation and global dialogue has always been the key for South Africa, multilateralism and how we position ourselves, and we've continued that.
How do we do that, though? Considering, or let me put it this way, has it felt a little bit more difficult to do, considering that the rest of the world hadn't changed its mindset or views on South Africa? And you had one person then all of a sudden come through, that's the United States in President Donald Trump. And that seemed to upend the global conversation a little bit, and many question marks were then put forward. Has that been a little bit difficult to put the best foot forward on South Africa, considering that we do have our own issues, of course, at play, whether it be crime and criminality as well?
The U.S. has always been an important partner for South Africa, and the dialogue continues with the United States. Regardless of what the administration's view is, we've always continued that, and we've seen it during B20 last year. There was a big delegation that came, and the business side of the U.S. has actually accepted the credentials from South Africa to, of course, run B20 this year. So that dialogue continues. The world has actually, the view on South Africa has improved so exponentially. I can't even put it into words. From all the engagements that we've had led by our president, all the engagements that we've had led by different ministries, it's been quite clear. Everyone wants to look at South Africa. They want to do business with South Africa. The geopolitics has actually forced us closer together. So as I've said, South Africa focuses, and we've always anchored our principles on dialogue. And what is the theme for Davos this year? Of course, the spirit of dialogue. And for us, as you know, in our culture, aribuwe, asikhulume, that's always been, whenever there's an issue, you use dialogue to resolve the issues. That is why we're here.
Yeah. So how do we resolve the dialogue and get things right when you have Minister Patricia de Lille here as well? What does that say? And I mean, I know there's a night in which we will then talk about, I think it's golf and wine, if I'm not mistaken. Let's talk about the premise for that.
Absolutely. For us, it was important to ensure that South African tourism is here and the Department of Tourism is here. Minister de Lille gladly accepted, of course, the invitation from the President to also be part of the delegation. For us as Brand South Africa, it's important that we don't only showcase the competitive side of South Africa, we've got to also showcase the tourism side. The visitor experience is very, very important. You're quite correct. Of course, we've seen what the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture has done. Minister Mackenzie bringing, of course, together with Premier Panyaza Lesufi, bringing, of course, Live Golf this year. We'll have that experience later in the week. We're going to have specifically a focus session that's looking at South Africa from a tourism side, but in particular looking at the MICE sector. Because of from an eventing perspective, we'll continue to showcase South Africa as a destination of choice. There's going to be major announcements happening this week. So all I can say is watch the space.
Yeah. Very important one, actually, when one considers the ability that South Africa certainly has and something maybe we haven't fully showcased as a country. Just very finally, or maybe not finally, but when one looks at how we look at South African future, how we create that investment mandate for the country. Yes, you've spoken about the grey listing. Yes, we've spoken about even our finances and the credit rating upgrade, etc. Is there something to be said about looking elsewhere for partners globally and not just sticking to what we've always known?
Yeah, we've looked at also over and above the partner search is how do we reposition ourselves from a sectoral perspective. We've had to look at critical sectors that are not only current sectors but future sectors and how those from an innovation perspective are going to drive our future focus and our future growth. Critical minerals is an important sector, subsector that's very important for us, and a dialogue that of course resonated from G20 passing on to now. We're going to have a specifically focused session that looks at that, but in particular value addition at source. Rather than looking at our raw materials being exported, we're looking at how we can value add within our destination South Africa. It also talks to our dialogue around localization, which is very, very important. So that's very, very critical for us. We're looking at, of course, transport infrastructure and the global logistics network. We're going to have a focus session that specifically deals with that, but not only from a South African perspective. How do we tap into the Africa Continental Free Trade Area using our core strengths from an infrastructure perspective? Because AfTA can only really work if there is connectivity within the continent. Both road, rail, ports and air, very, very critical for us. So those are some of the critical areas. And of course, the pharmaceutical sector, all these major sectors that we're looking at, manufacturing is very critical for us. So but we'll be looking at it from a future-oriented perspective. Okay, sure. How do we improve on what we've got to ensure that we attract the right skills for the future, but entrenched in innovation and technology?
I want to touch on that trade part a little bit more. I mean, you'll definitely have discussions with the WTO's Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, as well as Wamkele Mene. And those conversations are ones that we keep saying to ourselves, well, one, trade is key in focus. Tariffs that Donald Trump has certainly put in place across the world will become in key focus. But if we talk about Africa alone, Wamkele Mene comes into focus here, and we say to ourselves, well, how do we ensure that this actually finally works? Yes, it's been signed. Yes, but we keep having this conversation. When do we finally see the fruits of Africa, do you think?
Well, the fruits are already been realized. If you recall, South Africa 2 years ago already launched its first products shipment into the rest of the continent, in the east as well as into the north. That has grown. But all this cannot happen not being anchored by the requisite finances. So from African Bank, they've already been working very closely with the AfTA team, our banking system in South Africa, which is of course world-class. Our banks have also been working very closely with AfTA team to ensure that not only from a movement of goods, but also from a financing perspective, all those areas are covered. We're not out of the woods yet. Yeah. Of course, there's non-tariff barriers that are still plague our continent, which are very, very important, and I know that is top of the agenda with the Secretary General. Tomorrow morning, we're going to be hosting a session at 7:30 in the morning, Davos time, specifically focusing on AfTA and its benefits, and the SG will be there, Mr. Mene.
Absolutely great. Neville, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Very quickly, how do you keep warm in this weather?
I left my big jacket inside. My fingers are frozen. It's very, very cold, and coming from a beautiful, warm South Africa, yes, exactly. This is something very different. My ears are ringing. I wish I had my beanie on.
I'm very thankful for mine, that I can tell you.
I'm going to put mine on also. And hello to all the viewers at home.
Yeah, fantastic. Neville, again, appreciate it. Thank you so much.